So welcome to the last part of this series on looking at your wedding venue from a photographer's perspective. So far, we've chatted about 3 other topics: your getting ready space, your ceremony site, and your portrait locations. And we're wrapping up the series this week on the cocktail hour and your reception site, the last part of the wedding day, right? So let's get into it. Obviously, this is the party time of the day. This is when some of the stress can be relieved and you get to just sit down and enjoy being with your friends and your family and enjoy a meal together. Hopefully you're eating. A lot of brides and grooms and couples forget to eat. Don't forget to eat. Enjoy the evening together. This is such a fun part for me to photograph. I feel like this is when I really get to know my couples from the viewpoint of their family and their friends. I love getting to hear what they have to say about them during toasts. I love seeing how my couples interact with each other during those first few hours as husband and wife, first dances with each other, their parent dances, or trying to guess if they're cake smashers or if they're going to be like gentle cake feeders. I just love seeing this part of my couples, seeing them in this light. And also, I just get to step back and I get to document things as they unfold. I follow your timeline and I'm not really stepping in much to direct you guys. I'm just there to capture it as it happens. So I love the reception and I want to make sure that I get to capture it in a way that's going to make sure you remember how it felt. And so there are a few things to think about as you are touring your wedding venues and trying to picture your reception happening in their reception space. Probably the biggest thing that's important for me as your photographer is this question: is the ceremony site, the cocktail hour, and the reception space all in different locations? Or will the staff need to flip the space, take it down in order to set up the next event? This includes your rainy day option B. If it's raining out and you have to now take your ceremony indoors, will they have to take it down before they can set up the reception? That affects me because if they're still setting up for the reception, most likely I won't have enough time to photograph it before your guests start coming in and setting down their stuff or sitting down themselves. So it affects your timeline and it affects what I can photograph. So obviously an ideal situation is that the ceremony, the cocktail hour, and the reception are all in 3 different locations that can all be set up at the same time so that I can capture them before the guests come in and they can be ready to go when the timeline needs them to be. Obviously, if this isn't the case, then you'll want to make sure you have a second photographer for sure, so that the second photographer can be capturing those details while I'm finishing up with portraits during cocktail hour. You also will just need to make sure that there is enough time in your timeline to get those pictures before people start coming in. So that is the number one thing that I suggest thinking about when you're looking at your reception and you're thinking about that portion of the wedding day. Another consideration is, does your venue have a means of transportation from each location, or is it easy for everybody to walk to? So some venues will offer golf carts or some kind of shuttle to move the guests around from place to place if things are kind of spread out. If your guests are going to be walking, just taking that into consideration with your timeline, making sure there's enough time for them to walk from different places, from the ceremony site to cocktail hour to the reception site. Another thing to ask your venue is, do they provide anything fun for cocktail hour? So such as maybe beanbag toss or other yard games. Is there a space set up for that? If your cocktail hour is outdoors, then you can think about you as the couple providing yard games or other things that your guests can do during cocktail hour while they're waiting for you to finish up with pictures. Or if it's indoor, thinking about other things that you can bring in for your guest entertainment or things for them to look at or do while they're waiting for you guys to finish up with portraits. Other things to ask is there enough space for a dance floor with all of the tables set up? Or will you need to take down some of those tables before you guys can make room for dancing? That will also affect kind of your timeline and just the flow of things. And also thinking about how many guests you have in relation to their max. Obviously, like, of course, you don't want to go over their max amount, but being well under it is really nice too, because then you guys allow for space for guests to walk through. It doesn't feel totally crammed in that area. While it is nice to have options for your guests to be able to go outdoors if it's nice, or in the summertime for them to be able to float kind of in and out of the reception space and outside if they need a breather. But it's also important to make sure that you don't lose guests, that there's a way to keep them kind of contained and also to bring them back in when you want them to for dances or cake cutting. We don't want to completely lose them to their own devices outside of your reception area. So making sure that while you do want those spaces for them to float around, not letting them get too far away that you're losing them, especially when it comes time for dancing. You want to make sure that people are out on the dance floor dancing with you. So another few things to think about as far as your venue is making sure that if you want some kind of special exit or end of the night last hurrah, that your venue will allow for that. For example, some couples will want to shoot off like fireworks at the end of the night. Or if you want to have a sparkler exit, which I love sparkler exits, I will never say no to a good sparkler exit, making sure that your venue allows for that. Some of them do not. Other fun things that you could chat with your venue about would be perhaps lighting a lantern or having lanterns for your guests to send off at night. And if they don't allow for fires, such as the lanterns or sparklers, then other fun exits that I've seen are like bubble exits or glow stick exits. And just making sure that you know their policy on that, especially if you guys do have your heart set on a sparkler exit. Another thing in relation to your exit is, does the venue provide some kind of fun getaway car? Some venues that I've been to, they do have like a sweet vintage vehicle that you can rent to drive away in. If you decide to do that, make sure that you also rent it to have it a little bit earlier so that we can take portraits with you too, with the vehicle when it's daylight hours too. So a few final thoughts as we kind of wrap up this choosing your wedding venue, looking at it from a photographer's perspective, some of the things that I'm thinking about. Don't forget that obviously when you're viewing and touring these venues, the season makes a big impact. So if you're touring during wintertime when there's bare trees, then obviously it's going to look different. In the springtime, there might be some awesome gardens that are blossoming with flowers, or there might be trees that have beautiful blossoms on them. Or in the summertime, the view that you see now in the wintertime, it might be completely blocked by trees in the summertime. Or, we might find that there's other portrait locations in the fall when the leaves are turning orange and beautiful colors. So just be thinking about how your venue and the property will change depending on the season that you're actually getting married in versus when you're touring it. And then, of course, my last final thought from your photographer to you, if all of these things that we've talked about through the last 4 weeks, if they're not all in place, it's okay. These are like just the top ideal situations. Most venues are not going to have all of these things perfectly in place, as we've discussed. They're not all venues are going to have the exact ideal lighting situation for all 4 parts of your day: the getting ready space, the ceremony site, your portrait locations, and the reception. If you do find a unicorn venue that has all these perfect lighting situations for all parts of the day, awesome, book it. But if you don't and you're worried about it, don't be. Just pick a good photographer who knows what they're doing and trust them. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to pick a photographer that's already shot there before, because I've been shooting weddings for the last 10 years and I've seen a lot of different lighting situations. Even if it's not at the exact venue that you're at, I can promise you I will find a way to photograph it beautifully and perhaps even surprise the two of you in the results. So just make sure at the end of the day, if all of these things aren't exactly perfect, but you still love that venue and you know it's the one that you want, book it, and then book a photographer that can capture it in the way that you see it, in the way that you want to remember it. So this concludes my perspective on choosing your wedding venue. If you have any questions for me, I would love to hear them. And we're going to move on next week, and we're going to continue going on past your wedding planning process, past choosing the venue. So I'm looking forward to some of the coming weeks and the things that we're going to be chatting about. Thanks for following along, you guys, and for watching, and hopefully we connect soon.